I'm Emily of British Girl Bakes, and I'm going to show you how I made a rainbow number cake to celebrate getting to 100,000 followers on Instagram. I'm starting by making some rainbow meringues because they have to cool in the oven overnight. I've brought 1 inch of water to a boil in a saucepan, and I'm turning the heat off, and I'm placing my mixing bowl on top so that it doesn't touch the surface of the water, and whisking 4 egg whites and 1 cup of sugar together for 2 minutes. The recipe for these is on britishgirlbakes.com. After 2 minutes, I'm checking that the mixture's ready by pinching some of the mixture in between my thumb and my first finger to make sure that it doesn't feel grainy. It's smooth and sticky, so it's ready to go, and I'm transferring the bowl to my mixer and using the whisk attachment to whip the mixture on high for 7 minutes until it forms stiff peaks. I'm dividing the mixture into 6 bowls and adding gel food colour to each one, stirring it gently just a few times to make a marbled, blended colour, and then spooning it into a piping bag fitted with a 1mm piping tip. I've lined a baking tray with parchment paper, and I'm piping swirls of each colour onto it, leaving a bit of space between each one in case they expand slightly when they bake. I'm piping a few little stars with the same 1mm tip as well. I'll bake the meringues at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 90 minutes, and then turn the oven off, leaving them in there overnight to cool slowly so that they don't crack. This is how they look after baking and cooling. For the numbers, I've baked 3 rectangular cakes, each about 1 inch thick. After they cool, I'm wrapping them in cling film or saran wrap and chilling them in the fridge for a few hours so they'll be less crumbly. Now I'm tracing around the baking pan onto parchment paper and cutting it out, and I'm going to use this to trace my numbers. I'm folding it in half twice to make 4 equal parts, and sketching out my numbers, which are going to spell 100k. Each one will have 3 layers of cake, which is why I've baked 3 cakes. I'm cutting them out, trying to be really precise because when I cut around these letters onto each of the 3 cakes, I want the numbers to be exactly the same shape and size for each of the 3 layers of cake. My cakes are cold, and now I'm ready to cut out the numbers. I've separated my layers with parchment paper so that they don't stick to each other, and I'm starting with just one of the layers, placing a number on 1/4 of the cake, and cutting around it with a serrated knife. Because the cake is cold, it's easy to cut neatly without crumbs or chunks of cake coming off. I'm cutting all 4 numbers out of the rectangle, and I'm doing exactly the same for my other 2 layers of cake. And because I've separated them with parchment paper, I can just lift the cake layer up and onto a cutting board. If you're enjoying this tutorial, please click the thumbs up button. I share a new cake decorating tutorial every week, and if you don't want to miss one, click the red subscribe button. I also teach online cake decorating courses, and I've put the link for those in the video description below. I've made these numbers as big as possible, but even so, I have a bowl of cut-offs at the end, and I'm keeping the extra cake for another project, which I'll be sharing soon. This is my 4-minute buttercream, and I've put the link to the tutorial in the top of the screen and in the video description below. I've covered the buttercream in cling film until I'm ready to use it so that it doesn't crust, and now I'm spooning it into a piping bag fitted with a round tip, and this is a Wilton 1A tip. It's time to assemble the cake. I have my number cake layers, my buttercream, a large rectangular cake board, and I'll be using this useful cake lifter to pick up the layers of cake. For the first layer of numbers, I'm piping a few dollops of buttercream to act as glue to secure the numbers onto the cake board. I'm starting with the outside numbers so that I can space them equally along the board, because now that these are in place, I can put the final 2 numbers in between them and keep the distance on each side the same. I've drizzled these cakes with simple syrup to keep them moist, which is really important since they won't be frosted. And there's the first layer. Now I'm using my buttercream to pipe little dollops all over the letters, trying to pipe in rows so that the dollops are all lined up on the numbers. These are going to be covered by the next 2 layers of cake, so you won't really be able to see anything except the sides, but it's good practice for the top layer, which will be visible. For each dollop, I'm holding my bag just above the cake and applying pressure to the bag, squeezing out a dollop of buttercream, and then as I lift the bag up, I'm releasing my pressure at the same time to make a peak. Again, this isn't important for the bottom layers, but hopefully by the time I get to the top layer, I'll be used to the consistency of this batch of buttercream and my dollops and peaks will be perfect. I'm moving on to my next layer of cake and sliding the cake lifter under each number, separating it from the parchment paper because the moistness of the cake makes it a bit sticky. Alternatively, you can flip the parchment paper over and then peel it off the numbers. I'm lowering each one into place, and because the buttercream dollops have only just been piped, they're still really sticky, so the cake layers will attach nicely, and the cakes will be secure by the time the cake's assembled and I move the cake board. Another layer of buttercream dollops, another round of number-shaped cakes, and now for the top layer I have everything ready for the dollops, and also the decorations, which are going to be rainbow-coloured meringues and macarons. I'm piping the dollops onto the cake, and since these are going to be visible, I'm using my practice from the previous layers to line the dollops up neatly with the number of dollops per row that I tried out on the previous layers. I'm going to place the decorations on top immediately, while these dollops are still fresh and sticky, so that the decorations attach to the buttercream before it sets, and when the buttercream does set, it will secure the decorations in place. If you're going to add sprinkles, that should be done immediately too, so that they stick to the buttercream instead of bouncing off. I'm peeling the meringues off the parchment paper I baked them on, and placing them on the buttercream dollops, pressing gently so that they stick. I'm going to make this rainbow coloured, starting with red on this side and blending through the colours of the rainbow towards the other end, using both meringues and macarons of each colour. I'm rearranging the decorations a few times as I go, and that's fine because the buttercream hasn't set yet. So after I lift a decoration up, it will stick to the new place I put it, and another decoration will cover up the spot where I lifted the first decoration up. I love the decorating part. It's so much fun to see everything come together at the end. To store this cake, I'm going to put it back in the fridge until the buttercream sets and will hold its shape, and then I'll wrap the whole cake board in cling film, sealing all of the numbers inside so that they don't dry out. To transport it, it's best to keep it in the fridge until you leave so that the cake stays as cold as possible while you're moving it, so that the movement and vibrations don't affect it as much. As soon as you take it out of the fridge, you should take the cling film off so that it doesn't damage the buttercream. And if possible, it's best to assemble this only one day before you serve it, or even on the same day of serving it, so that it doesn't dry out. Thanks for watching! Please comment below with any tutorials you'd like to see, and if you haven't already subscribed, click that red subscribe button so you don't miss a tutorial.